Hey everybody, it's Rogelio here, and I just want to thank you for checking us out on our YouTube channel and going to our website, tigersmlreport.com. And last year, thanks to good friend of the show, Mark Gurash, he started a GoFundMe that helped us get to quite a bit of the minor league system last year through Erie, West Michigan, so on and so forth. And so we're asking this year, if you can, please donate a few bucks, help us get down to spring training, help us with cost overall. We do this, we don't make a lot of money, and we want to continue to do this to the best of our abilities. So please consider donating. The link is below. Thank you so much for supporting the Tiger Minor League Report, and have yourself a great day. Hello, everybody. Welcome to a Tiger Minor League Report mailbag. As we have, this is our first of the year, first for 2024, as we are trying to get things off to a good foot. We do have a couple guests potentially lined up here in the next couple of weeks, as spring training is now just 37 days away as the time of recording for this. So we wanted to make sure we get not only your mailbag out there, but also the just missed prospects. So there's going to be we're going to start a series on YouTube of shorts, 60-second, like prospects in 60 seconds. And it was inspired by this channel. There's a YouTube channel called The Sheep Wheeler, Chris, and he does Transformer reviews because I like his premise. He does it pretty quick and rapid, and it's pretty cool. And Transformers is a hobby of mine going back since I was a kid. So anyway, I don't know there. So that being said, Chris, we did get quite a bit. I like the response. Thank you for everybody who sent in questions on Twitter and on Gmail. And we got a couple new fans in the mix too, as well, that sent out some questions. So that was good to see. And especially with one of the things that the Tigers haven't done this offseason as of time of recording right now, has the prospect scene been relatively quiet. We haven't seen any trades. We keep thinking there's going to be something with the Tigers. And as of right now, we just saw today Jordan Hicks got 4 years and $44 million from the Giants, a team that's desperate for pitching, and they went that route. So it'll be interesting to see here in the next couple of weeks if anything happens.
Yeah, I mean the most recent Tigers news was just them, getting in a battle with Casey Mize over $25,000. So hopefully that they can get something else in our minds instead of that, because that's kind of a bummer.
Yeah, you hope there's more to it than just that.
Yeah.
We'll see. What were you gonna say, Chris?
Oh, I was saying, it's, I think part of the reason we're doing the Mailbag podcast is a lot of times people ask great questions during the show, and we try to get to them, but sometimes it can get distracting and we miss them, or we get sidetracked. So just doing a dedicated question show seemed like a good idea.
Yeah, no, it does allow for, let's just say, less distracted versions of ourselves, and and it's
we're easily distracted. We are like cats with microphones.
Yeah, but also at the same time, to be fair, I think because the last couple of years the show has grown quite a bit, that it's nice to get some interaction, and when sometimes we see some of the numbers and everything, so we're beyond grateful. But this just allows us to also put some video here and there and cut it up a little bit. So without further ado, Chris, what is the first question that we've received?
Right on. So, we got some emails, but we also got a bunch on Twitter, and we'll start with the Twitter ones. The first question was from our buddies Tigers Torquemoil. Said Brant Herter prediction: does he start the season in Erie or Toledo? And then kind of followed up with, if it's more beneficial, maybe your prediction list of each level's rotation. So I actually went through and I did kind of a prediction for each level's rotation. But I don't know if you want to give your thoughts on where does Brant Herter start next year.
So I think he'll start the season in Toledo. I think this would be technically his third season in Erie if he started the year there, and I think he proved himself. We witnessed it towards the end part of the season into the playoffs. He had a strong last 2 months of the season. He was able to mix his pitches better, and he got over that little bit of a slump there. I think it was I want to say mid-June, Chris, or something to that effect, where he struggled with walks. He was struggling with walks, and kind of a lot of times looked like he was overthrowing, gave up a little hard contact. But after, I want to say the second start of August, he just cruised. And so to me, I think it just makes sense for him to start the season in Toledo.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you there. I think I tend to I like Tigers Torquemada asked about doing each rotation, and that's kind of how I like to do it anyway, just to think about this. But one of the things, just with regard to Herter, and I agree with you. I don't think there's anything left for him to prove at Double A. He had like a FIP under 3, a lot of strikeouts, and overall in the season, not many walks. He had, like you said, he had a rough stretch there in the middle. Um, but I do remember, and this is something that we discovered, I think, last year, is that guys don't get promoted now just because, right? Just because they pitched well the year before. Because I came into last year assuming that Wilmer Flores was heading up to Toledo because he pitched so well in Erie in 2022. But he went back to Erie for the entire season, except for when he was hurt, because his stuff wasn't as good and he didn't perform as well. And so I assume that made itself kind of clear in spring training. And so they sent him back to Erie. So, you know, we kind of do this without knowing, if somebody has regressed a little bit or if they're injured, we don't know. So if we just assume that everybody's the same or getting better and not injured, the rotations that I came up with were, with Detroit, Skubal, Maeda, Flaherty, and Olson, I think are probably the most likely to be in there. And then it's like a 3-way battle between Matt Manning, Casey Mize, and Sawyer Gibson Long for that 5th spot. And again, some of these guys will get hurt and won't matter. So then you go down to Toledo, and this is where it gets interesting because 2 of those guys, presumably, of Mize, Manning, and Gibson Long, are going to be down in Toledo to start the year, and then probably Kiter Montero, and then probably 2 of the guys in from Erie. 2 of the 3, Brant Herter, Ty Madden, Wilmer Flores. You have to assume 2 of those guys are going to come up. I guess you don't have to assume, but I am. So that's a 5 there. But they did re-sign Brendan Hanafy, who started in Toledo last year. I know he was relieving, I think, for Detroit. But he's another name. It's Lyle Lockhart is a possibility in Toledo. And it's also possible they move Montero or Flores to the bullpen. But to me, I do think Herter, of all those guys who were in Erie, I think Herter is the one who most deserves and is most well suited, I guess, to handling Toledo. Then I moved down to Erie, and as of right now, my Erie rotation is Jackson Jobe, and then I have Lockhart back there, but it could be Flores and Madden. Dylan Smith, I think, probably returns to Erie, and then it's kind of a question of Troy Melton, I think, is the better prospect and has the better future, but he ended last year on the injured list, and you don't know. It's between like him and Carlos Pena, who I believe is still in the system, right?
Yeah, he's
The
still
lefty.
yeah.
So I think one of those 2 ends up rounding out that rotation, and then the one who doesn't is back in West Michigan, along with probably Garrett Burhan, Joe Miller, who had a nice stretch down the end of the season in Lakeland. Then I've got Jaden Ham, bumping up to he may he was their 5th rounder last year, and he had a really nice pro debut, so he may start in Lakeland or West Michigan, but I'm pushing him up to West Michigan because he was so good in such a small sample. And then it's like, I don't know, Willie Ander Moreno. I know he started a bunch. And then down in Lakeland, I think Carlos Marcano is going to spend the 3rd year in Lakeland probably. He got better last year, but he's still only like 20, so there's no rush. And then I have a couple of the guys they drafted last year, Hayden Menton and Andrew Sears, and then Edgardo Ibarra, the lefty, and then I put Colin Fields. And then after that, there are a lot of guys that they took in the last 2 drafts, last 3 drafts, who kind of haven't done much yet to separate themselves, but I assume some of them will, and they'll be in those rotations. So that was my thoughts on the various rotations, and we'll see it again in probably a month or 2 months. We'll come up with a little bit more concrete list.
Yeah, because for me, if you look at what the Tigers did last year at this time versus currently, they had a lot more minor league free agents they were looking at this build of Toledo. But it's not so much the case now, where of course, a couple of bullpen arms. They re-signed Vasquez, and you mentioned Hanfey earlier. So if you're looking at the starting rotation for Detroit, for myself, this is where it gets a little tricky. I mean, the top 3 automatically: Skubal, Flaherty, Maeda, no problem. But then, I mean, and sorry, Reese Olson. I think Reese Olson. But this is where, but the thing is that I also don't think Reese Olson's a guaranteed lock either. Because
No, I would agree with you. I think that the 3 that you mentioned are definitely because Skubal, and then the other 2 guys have big contracts,
yeah,
so they're going to be there.
yeah. But as far as Olson's concerned too, it's kind of, I'm not saying he has a lot of pressure to live up to that sophomore slump because he pitched better, that he pitched beyond before September. So he doesn't have the same kind of title per se than Sawyer Gibson Long, who has that. So you're looking at Manning, who's coming off injury. Is it a foregone conclusion he comes back and is a fifth starter? No. I mean,
I don't think so.
so I mean, right now, as of right now, I'm going to pencil in. I think they're going to have to pencil in somebody like Sawyer Gibson Long and Olsen, fourth and fifth starters. I think that might be the case because, and I'm not saying because they're going to trade Matt Manning or anything. The variable is how healthy is Matt Manning going to be coming back, and if so, yeah, of course you can pencil him in right there. But it's splitting hairs between Olsen and Gibson Long because Olsen provides a completely different uh, in terms of mound presence than Sawyer Gibson Long because the defense, because the way he throws, Sawyer Gibson Long's uses a lot of grounders. Olsen's more, correct me if I'm wrong, I think he has a fly ball, he gets more fly balls and strikeouts. So that's a different look. And your defense, we don't know what's going on at third base either. So that also, we're going to assume that it's going to be Verling starting the year, or
Well,
yeah, who knows? But
yeah, I mean Olsen. It's fun to have different looks in a rotation, and Olsen and Gibson Long would provide that back to back. It'd be kind of fun because Olsen is just like the pure stuff guy, right? Tons of spin. Whereas Gibson Long has elite extension. He's taller and he throws the ball. He's like 99th percentile extension. It's like a 7.5 foot release point. So which is like the opposite of Olsen. It's just it would be interesting, but maybe that would be more fun as like a tandem. Bring one in right after the other where that would matter. But yeah, I don't know. There's plenty of time to figure out the rotations, and actually, it does seem like they have too much pitching right now at the upper levels. But as we say, these things always work themselves out. March, I think, maybe it's February is the biggest month. February, March are the biggest months for pitcher injuries. So I don't think they're going to come through that unscathed.
yeah, as far as Toledo goes, real quick, I'll just breeze through Toledo and Erie. West Michigan, I'm kind of really unsure about, but Toledo, Mize, Flores, Hurdler, Montero, and Mason Englert will be your starters. I think Alex.
I totally forgot about Engler.
Yeah,
I didn't have him on my list, so that's another one to throw in there.
Yeah, because I think they're going to try to extend him again as a starter to give him some more depth. And Faedo, I don't know, Chris. I think Faedo may end up going to the bullpen.
I think they need to put him in the bullpen.
Yeah, just to stay him healthy too. As far as so, that's the thing where I'm also on the fence about putting Madden in there too, as maybe as a sixth starter, or maybe he'll, if depending on what happens with Montero, however they decide to use Montero, I can see Madden getting an opportunity too. So as far as the start the year in Erie, Lockhart, I think will start the year in Erie, maybe, and then eventually get a quick call up to Double-A, depending on what happens in West Michigan. Jackson Jobe, I think Troy Melton's going to start the year in West Michigan to get some footing back because he was out. He missed the rest of the season. Dylan Smith, definitely could see that happening. Will Kill Hernandez definitely started the season in Erie as a back end of the starter rotation. He was one of the league leaders in ERA in Midwest League for whatever that's worth. So I don't think he feels like he's been in West Michigan, like Parker Meadows, for a long time. So it's like 2019, I feel like, since they're.
Yeah, he has been there. Yeah, I mean, he showed up, I think, as a 19 or 20-year-old when they were low A.
And then Garrett Burhan, I think the Erie rotation is going to be not as crisp per se. The back end is going to be a struggle, comparatively speaking, to what they've usually been doing the last couple seasons. And at West Michigan, it's a who's who of, like, I want to see. You mentioned Jaden Ham earlier. It'd be nice if you're a West Michigan Whitecaps fan, you want to have Jaden Ham in your rotation to start the year, because beyond that, Chris, I think there's a drop off there. I'm gonna stop at West Michigan because the rest of the kind of, again, is Jack Diaz going to be pitching in Lakeland to start the year? Who knows? I mean, there's just going to be.
Is he going to be a starter? Is he going to? Yeah, I looked at some of the guys. Like I think Dunford and Diaz and those guys will be down, and Paul Wilson probably, if he's healthy, will be down in the complex league. But you never know. I mean, it depends on how they look in spring training.
Yeah, I mean, I would like to get more of a look at Hayden
Minton.
Minton. Yeah, because it's for whatever reason I immediately thought of Eric Milton, but Eric was a lefty. But anyway,
Let's see, the good Minton or the bad Minton. Um,
Milton. That's
no,
Milton.
but
Eric Milton, by the way.
Jaden Ham would be great. Great for West Michigan if he goes out there and pitches well, and they can do a concessions thing like they did back in the day with Joey Pancake. You could have a ham themed food item pretty easily.
Oh man, that'd be just tie it in already, make it happen already. I'm sure there's a local sponsorship waiting to happen.
Yeah.
So, all right, on
Our
to the next question.
next question comes from our buddy Mitch Lutsky. I think that's how you pronounce his last name. And it's actually something we discussed briefly on the Motor City Metrics show. He said, "I'm interested in your thoughts on outfielder Seth Stevenson. Elite speed, apparently. So, what are your thoughts on Seth Stevenson? Again, friend of the show.
Friend of the show, Seth Stevenson. I really like his work ethic. I think he is a guy who really had put himself on the map last year, steals, taking advantage of the new rules. And he, when you realize how athletic he is, and like that really plays up a good part of it. That being said, looking at some of his advanced data in Lakeland, I mean, it was all right. I mean, he hit the ball. It was like in the middle of the pack with that, and so I think somebody, comparatively speaking, like somebody was trying to. There was a comp about him and Dom Johnson because of quickness, but I think Steph Stevenson has better ball or bat to ball skills, and
Yeah.
I it really, I honestly, I think I could see him potentially being a utility or maybe like a utility outfielder someday. Maybe hit the major leagues, but I gotta see what he does in Erie. I really before I can make any type of determination. But there's enough skill set I think that he could potentially be a fourth outfielder someday.
Yeah, I mean, and I think he played a little bit, and he was a shortstop second baseman, I think, in junior college and college before heading Tennessee and playing mostly outfield. But yeah, I mean, the standout tool is the speed, of course. He's a very fast young man. He's got terrific base stealing instincts, and he's a good outfielder, and he's got a strong arm. He's one of the stronger arms in the system. On offense, it's kind of decent back to ball skills. I wouldn't say they're a plus or above average even, but he does have a knack for getting on base. He's kind of a fringe average walk guy, but he gets hit a ton. Uh, he got hit 30 times last year in just over 500 plate appearances. So like once every 17 plate appearances, he got hit, and that went up when he got to high A. He went up to high A and got hit 6 times, 68 plate appearances. So that generally is a skill for some reason. And I don't remember him standing particularly close to the plate, but he must do something there. The main issue, and I think you kind of touched on it, is I mean, you want to see him against advanced pitching, but it's just the lack of impact in his bat. He's listed at 5'8", 165. He's a smaller guy. I wouldn't call him frail, but he's not sturdy like a short Jose Altuve. He's not like a fire hydrant. And he just doesn't hit the ball very hard. We did have Jerry compile all his exit velocity data for us in Lakeland, and his average exit velocity last year was 79 miles per hour, which may be thrown off by bunts. The lowest qualified hitter in the majors last year was 82.7 miles per hour, and then the next lowest was 84.6. So we're talking like 5 miles an hour slower than the bottom in the big leagues. Now, that's not everything, right? And again, it could be thrown off by bunts. And we have his hard hit rate, which was not. It's still very low, 21.9%, but it was higher than 4 big leaguers, including Stephen Kwan, who, you know, Stephen Kwan has elite bat to ball skills, elite on base skills, and is a good defender. But if you're not going to hit the ball very hard, you have to kind of have that. And I'm not sure that Seth Stevenson has the secondary skills to do that. So yeah, it to kind of wrap that up. Roger's right. We got to wait and see. We got to wait and see what happens with him at higher levels against better pitching. If he can start to hit the ball harder, I think there's a chance.
Yeah, I don't want to disparage any. Again, it's one of those things where it really you have to see more of a sample size before just kind of making a determination on that. So, on to the next question, sir.
All right, this is from Julius, and it's not terribly specific. It just says Dingler's chances tie Madden (parentheses 1 more year in minors). And there's so yeah, I think the idea. I just basically, what do we think of Dylan Dingler and Ty Madden?
I think it was Lynn Henning wrote a piece today about about Dylan Dingler, and this is kind of a make or break year for him. And as cliche as it sounds, he's correct. Dingler defensively grades well. We've seen it since day one. We've seen that series where you and I, James Chipman and Jake Bowes went out and saw Dingler just totally
Loved him.
100%. Yeah, he was awesome. So that being said, we've seen a lot of at bats that were just, you just look like 1, 2, 3, you're out. Just really quick at bats, nothing that you would profoundly see it and go, okay, he's getting it a little bit, but he struggled with off speed. So this is the time where if he can improve himself in the bat and clean himself up, then perfect. Then I think he is still a prospect to me. Madden last year pitched well the second half of the season, started getting lefties out better, but you're still having the risk of I think he still needs a little bit of seasoning, and you still want to see better location with the fastball.
Yeah, I'm with you on both fronts. I think Dingler got added to the 40-man roster, which is the first step, right? And he's cleared one hurdle, but yeah, once he reached Double A, he just kind of hit that plateau where he improved a little bit last year. He hit for more power, slightly higher average, walked more, but then he went up to Toledo and didn't do a whole lot in like a 25 game sample. I think, whereas I once thought that he had a chance to be a regular catcher and even had like all-star upside, and certainly the physical tools are all there. I think he's just he's most likely a backup at the big league level if he finds a role in the big leagues. And again, they added him to the 40-man roster because they love his defense, and there's power there and there's athletic ability. It's just like you said, the at bats are kind of inconsistent. There's not a ton of quality contact, and that needs to improve. But catchers do take forever sometimes. Jake Rogers is a good example of that. Is a guy who kind of looked like he might not make it at all, and then really came through with an awesome season last year. So certainly not giving up hope on Dingler. I'm just kind of trying to lower my expectations. And with Madden, I think you're right. Solid year last year. He's a guy who's got a really good arm, and he's got all the pitches you need, and he just needs to put it all together at some point. And right now, it's looking more like a back end starter. But the physical ability is there to be better than that. We just have to kind of wait and see him do it.
Yeah.
So,
He pitched really well last year in the playoffs, and that really elevated him to a certain extent, or elevated him to where you knew Madden pitched big time in Texas too. It's not like he hadn't done before. He had a
yeah,
song, and I can't remember the song he came out to, but as
yeah,
I
I'm not sure.
recall, there was a certain song, and I remember it was like, I know Greg and Christy and all those people over there in Erie were talking. He has like a theme where he gets all pumped up for it. But anyway, I
Yeah,
forgot what it was. But either way, it was just kind of, he's ready to get to the big league level. He wants to get there really quick. So
yeah, and I think he will. I think that there's I don't know. It was a weird thing where I felt like we were higher on him early on than the industry, and then now I think the industry is a little bit higher on him than us. But we still have him in the top 10 prospects in the system, I think, right? Or was he like 11 or 12? I don't
I
remember.
think it's 11. 11.
Yeah, he's a good arm, and he'll get to the big leagues. Next question is from Steven Osmond. He said, "Since second base is really not filled, can we expect a rookie to fill it?"
What was that last part, Chris?
He said, "Since second base is really not filled, can we
Oh,
expect a rookie to fill it?"
not since the days of Scott Sizemore. Well,
Yeah.
yeah, I still think it's going to be Cole Keith that will get there, but I personally think it's going to be, we're going to see some more Andy Baez at first. And then if Cole Keith, we're going to see some rookie time this year. That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, that's essentially what I had, I prepared. I think that they are essentially holding the spot for Colt Keith. He still has to earn it. This isn't like, kind of Spencer Torkelson in 2022 didn't go out and have a very good spring training, and it didn't look like he was ready for the big leagues, but they had basically already penciled him in as their big league first baseman, and they didn't really have any other options, so they gave him the job. I think Colt Keith still needs to go out and win it. And if he doesn't, I think they'll be perfectly happy to play Ibanez and McKinstry and maybe Ryan Kreidler or Lipsius or whomever else, Winsel Perez, Eddie's Leonard. They have a bunch of guys who could theoretically play second base. but I think they want Colt Keith to win it, and I think he will. I think we've seen enough from Colt. He had a great spring training last year, and I think he's just the kind of hitter he is and the kind of professional he is. I think he's going to go out and win that job. So that's my expectation. You never know. He could get hurt and then doesn't get the at bats and something else happens. But I do think they're holding it for him.
Yeah. Otherwise, I think they would have made a move already, and we're in mid-January. So, I think we'll see multiple rookie contributions this year.
For sure. And I mean, Parker Meadows is technically a rookie too, and he's going to have a big role in the team.
All right. What's the next question?
Steve Dunkel. Steve Dunkel says thoughts on Luke Gold and Tyler Madison.
Luke Gold. See,
Luke Gold.
So you saw more Luke Gold than I did at West Michigan. So I'll let you go with this one first.
Okay. So, yeah, he had a really interesting year because he was not good to start his pro career in Lakeland last year. I mean 2023, 2022, 22. And then got off to a really rough start this year too. I wrote it down through May, through like 30 games. He had a WRC plus of just 69 in Lakeland. It wasn't looking good. But then from June on, over 71 games, including a bump up to West Michigan, he hit 280 with power and put up a 138 WRC plus, which is really good. And so you watch him, and he's got kind of a nice mix of hitting ability and patience and pop. There's some power in his bat. And I've talked about it before, but his swing reminds me a little bit of Kerry Carpenter's, just from the right side. He kind of hangs back on that, lifts his front leg and kind of hangs back on his back leg and then launches. And I think, I don't think any of his tools really stands out as more than above average, but together on offense, they work pretty well and they give him a chance. He snuck into our top 30. He ended up 30th because of that strong finish. And, he's just kind of fringy defense, so he's going to have to hit a bunch, but he'll be one of the more interesting players to watch this year for me. Just the pure hit guys, because he's not one of the top tier prospects, but I do think he has some ability, and it'll be nice to see if he can break out a little bit.
And that's another win in the scouting department in the northeastern side of things. The Tigers have done really well.
Yeah, from Boston College.
Yeah, they've done really well in that part of the country, and so yeah, you're encouraged by the ISO numbers over 200. But again, it's almost like in the Seth Stevenson case. Can he make those adjustments at Erie? And I think he can. I don't know if second base might be his long-term position, but I then again, because the Tigers, we saw this last year with Trey Cruz. He was starting center fielder for Erie opening day. Maybe they see someone else, Luke Gold. I think Luke Gold's athletic enough that he could make a position change if need be, though. So that's right.
Yeah,
that's what I think.
I think he's played some third base too. It's it's interesting. Each minor league season has kind of a story of itself, and the West Michigan offense was completely different by the end of the year than it was at the beginning of the year. It's funny to think about this, but they began the year with Justice Bigby and Chris Myers hitting in their order, along with Roberto Campos and Isaac Pacheco, and by the end of the year, only Pacheco was there, and Gold was kind of their key offensive contributor down the stretch. So, yeah, like I said, he's just kind of flew under the radar a little bit, and we wanted to give him some notice. And yeah, he's just one of the guys to keep an eye on this year. And speaking of the Northeast, the other guy he asked about was Tyler Madison, who I think who is actually only 2 spots ahead of Luke Gold on our prospect list, but that's just by virtue of him being a reliever, and relievers, as prospects, it's always a question as to whether you want to put him on a list or not. But I think we're both fairly high on Tyler Madison. I think he's got the stuff to pitch in the back end of the big league bullpen. Maybe not close, but I think he eventually will get a few saves. It's mid 90s fastball with a ton of carry because it comes like right over the top, and he's got a solid breaking ball and a changeup that both flash above average. And it's a little bit of a violent delivery, and he sprays it a little bit. So I think his walks will be slightly elevated, and he'll probably run into some home run issues against the top echelon hitters when he's throwing his fastball at the top of the zone. But I think it's stuff that will work in a 7th, 8th inning role in the big leagues.
We saw that a little bit last year in the playoffs against Binghamton. you saw what I saw at least was the kind of like the evolution of him from the middle of the season. I remember, was it 10 innings of no hit ball when he first started?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, and I remember I remember you or discussing that, like just in terms of how that was going to build up, where he was kind of, I think, wasn't he? He was starting too, like wasn't he? When Year's rotation was shorthanded a little bit, he started. Oh, it was a kind of opener, right?
I think he was an opener once or twice. Yeah,
Yeah, and so I think once he got back to the back end of the bullpen again, I think that's where he got settled in. But you're absolutely right, Chris. When he gets that elevated fastball, it's not going to fool everybody, and some people are going to be able to tank it pretty well. And
yeah, he does. He has the other pitches to keep him off that a little bit, or to keep guys guessing. So yeah, I mean, I think I don't know. I would expect him to be in Toledo this year and possibly in Detroit at some point this year. I mean, they've got a fair amount of relief options, but that's a good arm. So yeah, I think that's I would label him as their top pure relief prospect. I'm sure one of the starters they have will eventually become a reliever and maybe surpass him, but right now he's the top relief prospect to me.
yeah, there's no doubt we'll see some time in Detroit this year. I think he might even, if the Tigers, you know what? I mean, this might be a little of a bold take, but you could see him and a combination of him and Brandon White, sure, the Tigers decide to move on from a veteran.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's they like I said they've got good arms, good stuff. So it's nice options to have there in the minors.
All right, Chris, what is the next question?
We're moving on to David Jackson, who this is he said, "What pitchers are down on the farm and thus far unseen by Tigers fans?" So I'm assuming he's saying, not Gibson Long, not Olson, not guys who've come up to the big leagues, who have a real chance to either be in the starting rotation or competing to become the closer by 2025. Um, so yeah, basically by next season, who in the minors has a chance to be in the rotation or in the bullpen?
I know I spoke very high of Jaden Ham a couple weeks back as my surprise, as somebody I think will be highly talked about. Whether he gets in the rotation, it's a little bit of a stretch. But that being said, as far as looking at pitchers that you can see in 2025 in the starting rotation, Jackson Job's one of them. Or I'm sorry, that's not talked about. Okay, so not talked about.
Well, no, he just said that they
Oh,
have has been unseen. So I don't
oh,
know. Like,
okay.
I mean,
Like people giving a lot of
I
attention.
took that to mean that guys who haven't been up to the big leagues yet, because it would be pretty unusual for somebody that nobody's heard of to suddenly, like Ham would be a good example of somebody that nobody has even seen in the minors really, to come up and reach the majors. But I think I just took it as the guys who have a chance to be in the rotation.
Okay, well then, if that's the case, then I think somebody who would be somebody that I think really in terms of like a back end bullpen guy who can come up really quick or kind of make a quick impression. Wow, Lockhart still to me. I think that if he can get that split finger down, I think he could be a surprise, maybe a spot starter, fourth or fifth starter, maybe somebody that the Tigers use like a swingman out of the bullpen because lefties are at a premium form right now. So if he can, I think if he can come out and press, I think he will do that. Another guy too to look out for, as far as somebody that on the bullpen side of things, is Andrew Magno, who he's not really talked about. He's on our list. He's on many others. Magno is somebody that I know it's particular to us. We've seen quite a bit of him. He's been able to close. I was talking to Mark Rosh from the Days of War podcast, and he was like, I don't know about him. It's just his curveball doesn't lack shape. Da da da. Tomato. I beg to differ with him about that, but that's a guy who I could see in a bullpen too. And another arm too that doesn't really keep out a lookout for a Rule 5 pick, Nick Starr. I say that
All right.
because there's the Tigers. Look what happened to Lockhart. Look what happened with Mason Engler. They saw
Mhm.
something with Starr. Maybe he might make an appearance in the bullpen. That's just a long shot right there. But
Yeah, I just thought of basically everybody we've already mentioned potentially being in the rotation next year. You mentioned Job. I think he probably has the best shot because he has the best combination of stuff and upside. But we may see all of Montero, Madden, Flores, and Herter at some point in the next year. And then the kind of the tier right below them where they could possibly break out, Troy Melton and Dylan Smith as starters. You mentioned Ham. On the future closer side, I don't know if there's anybody. Maybe one of these starters goes nuts as out of the bullpen, like Montero, and he's throwing like 102, and you're like, okay, all right. But mentioned Madison. The only other guy I could think of was Freddie Pacheco. If and when he's healthy, is a guy that has back into the bullpen potential. But yeah, I think it's basically all the guys who are currently in Erie or Toledo.
Yeah, I was trying to be a little different with that answer. I mean, obviously, I have
Yeah,
some of the guys there, but I was thinking about why would they pick Nick Star? They pick Nick Star, so I thought that was interesting, and I'm sure there's something
he did the
to
theme
it.
song for that '70s show.
Yeah. Hanging.
Um,
All right, so go ahead. Next question.
yeah, we only two more from from Twitter. We got Corey Rosier, truther. He says, "Does Justice Bigby have what it takes at a higher level?"
If that's at the $1 million question heading into
Yeah,
2024, I think Bigby. You look at the data, ball data. It's clear that he can hit the ball, and you worry about the power at the major league level. As long as he's hitting. Look, Rod Crew won the batting crown with no home runs in 1973. As a trivia question we talked about yesterday, but or is it 72? I can't remember the year. Anyway, I know this is a different tomato kind of thing right now, or completely different eras, but I think Bigby will be fine. I really think so. Now it's just a question of where to put him defensively.
yeah. I mean that was what it was kind of made it tougher than it sounds to me, or to me than it sounds, because I do believe in Justice Bigby's bat. I think he has the ability to consistently make hard contact. We've seen it. He's got a strong eye, uh, and there's plenty of raw power there. But it is, like you said, he's basically a corner outfielder only. I don't think they want him at first base anymore. And his swing really it's just not geared right now to hit more than like 15 home runs a year. He's got tons of power the opposite way. That's really impressive. But if he doesn't pull the ball more, he's just going to get pounded on the inside third of the plate, and it'll be tough for him to hit more than 15 home runs. So now, if you're hitting 300 with 15 home runs, I think most teams would take that from a corner outfielder, depending on how the defense is, right? But if it's more like 260 with 10, 15 home runs, then you're getting kind of into like the Matt Vierling territory, where it's like you can play, but they're going to be looking for somebody that's better than you.
Yeah, and that's where the reason why I was talking about the defensively is that he has the ability to play first base with Spencer Torkelson being there, but he's not a power hitting first baseman. He's more like trying to
Yeah.
think of an example of hitting. Well, Sean Casey. Sean Casey wasn't a home run guy, was he?
No, not really.
No.
I mean, he had a couple of years, I think, with some decent home runs, but by the end, he was not hitting home runs. Yeah, there have been the first baseman like Mark Grace and yeah, John Olerud, but those are like elite hitters, and maybe Bigby becomes that, but I don't, you don't ever want to just say that guy's going to be a batting champion, right? It's I don't have the foresight to predict that for him, but yeah, I think it's probably a left fielder, and it's just a matter of how much power he can produce. If he can get the power numbers up, I think he's got a real shot.
Yeah.
Um,
Let's
and
move on.
our last one here is from K-Line Country. He said, "Thank you for all you do for us Tigers fans at K-Line Country. We thank you very much for supporting. Thank everybody for supporting."
Yeah,
And
Caitlin.
this was
By the way, Caitlin Country does a really good job of posting our stuff on blog. I've seen him post on blogs too, I believe, as well, or our stuff on forums and stuff.
that's
So
very appreciated. And this one I think is kind of closer to what that last question was, or the one about guys coming from nowhere. So, do you have two or three pitchers and two or three hitters other than Max Clark we will be hearing about in 2025? Probably in the lower minors and not in the top 30. So this is where we get
yeah.
to name a bunch of dudes. So
So hitter wise, looking for the next big person to break out. Then, uh, you know, I have three names in mind. I have three names that I've thought about this a little bit. Brady, we've heard really good things about Brady Allen. Brady Allen's not
mhm.
on any prospect list, but he came in and did a really good job of defensively. I mean, he really saved West Michigan's season. I'm not trying to exaggerate when I say that, but the way defensively with some of the stuff we saw with Roberto Campos, the, they were they were a liability out there. I mean, at one point too, Chris Myers was seeing time in the outfield, and so before he went up to Erie. So that being said, I think Brady Allen's a guy who could potentially move up there. Another one comes to mind is Brett Callahan, who was drafted in 13th round, he had a solid start at Lakeland. So I think he's going to be somebody to look out for. And last, this one was a little tough for me, but don't forget about Alfonso. I think
Alfonso, yeah.
he had a really good postseason in Erie, and I think that. I mean, I'm not going to put him as the next Miggy or anything like that. It's not a guy who's going to hit with home runs, but he does have really good bat to ball skills, and defensively, he got a lot of praise from Gabe Alvarez on how he's able to. He immediately, that's a veteran staff in Erie, and he came in and handled it pretty well. So I think that's another name that will get some more attention this year.
Yeah, those are good ones. Callahan reminds me a little bit of Ben Malgeri. And yeah, Brady Allen. I think Brady Allen got some votes in our top 40s when we did our list, but I don't think he ended up in anybody's top 30. But that's a good one. I went with some more like recent guys. Carson Rucker was their 4th round pick this year. He made it to 2 of our top 30 lists, but didn't get on 3 of them, which would have been, qualify him in the top 30. And we've seen him a little bit. It's kind of right now it looks a little bit like an opposite field approach, almost like Justice Bigby's. But he's a big kid, and he played shortstop last year. I think he's going to play mostly third. But he's a guy who I think maybe gets a little bit forgotten just because the Tigers went prep hitter to start the draft. In many years under like the Avila Dabrowski era, they would have gone college, and if they had taken Carson Rucker, in the 4th round where they took him as their first prep hitter, I think people would be a lot higher on him just because we used to get excited about that sort of thing. But now the Tigers are getting more aggressive in the draft, which is fun. And I also, Brady Trachonic, who we barely saw last year, the catcher out of JUCO, who was a Canadian kid, and I think he got hurt almost immediately. But he's a 15th round pick, but they gave him 5th round money, which tells you that they like him a lot and they think there's something there. So I don't know. We'll see. But I'm curious to see what he can do. He put up some pretty ridiculous numbers in JUCO. And then there were just a couple of the international guys that we don't really know. Enrique Jimenez was their big signing last year, a switch hitting catcher, and he went out and he looks like he's got a pretty mature approach. So that'll be fun to see if he can hit a little bit and when he comes to the United States. And then another guy is Anibal Salas, who is another switch hitter, but he's an outfielder and he's super tooled up and had a really nice debut. So those are a couple of guys there. And then I don't know if you had any pitchers you were thinking about.
In terms of Jaden Ham is probably what I would come to mind. And then the other pitcher I had that may come up and sneak up on you a little bit is this was kind of like I mentioned, like I said, Nick Starr earlier as a kind of a surprise out of nowhere, but maybe so I'm not willing to give up on this guy yet, but if Campos can figure out where to throw the ball,
Ulysses Campos,
Ulysses Campos can figure out where he can, if he can throw
strikes,
if he throws strikes, then you got another potential bullpen arm. I know it sounds like, but we saw enough, Chris. I think you and I both talked about him. It was similar to the who was there was an arm in West Michigan that we really liked too. Starts with
Christian Tortosa,
Tortosa.
Yeah, you watch him pitch, and if you see him on the right day, you go, "Geez, this is really good," and then you go, "Oh, all right." But that's one of the tough things is being consistent and throwing strikes. So, yeah, I like that. I had some high hopes for Campos and Marco Jimenez last year, and neither of them could really find the strike zone. But and for me, I just kind of go to last year's draft again, just because I think these guys tend to fall through the cracks. Not not a ton. I think we've talked about Cenk Diaz a fair amount, but I'm really excited to see what he can do because he's got a really good arm. We got to see glimpses of it last year, and he's legitimately mid-90s with 2 secondaries. He's a big, strong kid. I wonder if he'll work out of the bullpen, but he could be an exciting pitcher. And then, you know, we didn't get to see a ton of Andrew Dunford, but when we talked to Ryan Garco, he was pretty excited about him. And you go back and look, and you could see why. He's a big kid. He's like 6'6", and the ball just comes out of his hand really easy. And it looks like he's going to be kind of like a classic sinker slider guy that they probably work with a lot. So that's a guy it'll be interesting to follow him in the years to come.
Well, you know what? Before we move on, though, there's one one arm that you mentioned earlier, Andrew Sears, out of the 10th round, a little bit.
Lefty from Connecticut.
Yeah, the lefty from Connecticut. That's another one. I was going to ask you if he starts the season now that Lakeland's going to be on camera. I'm interested to see your thoughts on him too going forward because he's 21, so he's kind of young for being post draft, correct, Chris? I mean, in terms of just
yeah. That it's on the younger side for college. He was he drafted as a 20-year-old? He may have been.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like I kind of touched on it before. There are a handful of guys from the last few drafts that were pitchers that we just haven't seen a ton of. One of the guys was like my breakout pick last year was Joe Adametz, who did pitch well, but didn't even pitch till the middle of the season. And you got the Joe Miller and Jake Miller, and you got the Quinn Gaditis and these guys that they haven't really, forced themselves onto the scene yet, but they're all there. And it wouldn't shock me if any one of those guys kind of pops up from seemingly out of nowhere and becomes a prospect. It's just we haven't seen much of anything from them yet, so we don't know.
Yeah, that's where again, but the reason why it just stood out to me is because his age just.
Yeah, he just turned 21 the day before Halloween. So yeah, he's very young for his draft class it looks like he spent 2 years at Rhode Island College before transferring to Connecticut. So yeah, that's a good. I mean, he's we talk about the system kind of needing some more lefties, and that's a good call. It's always easy to go back to last year's draft because a lot of people just haven't even heard of these guys yet or they haven't pitched yet. So
yeah, no, we need to see some more eyes. Okay, so we got a really extensive. Well, I would say we only got a few questions in the email side of things, but they were very elaborate questions, Chris.
yeah. Yeah. So let's see. Should we go through those, or you want to do it, or you want me
to? Go ahead while you're there.
All right. Well, let's.
We were doing a good
job. I think the first one we got was from Luigi Garcia, who said, "What are Pedro Garcia's prospects for the 2024 season?" I'm assuming this is a relative. We love relatives here. We appreciate you guys. Unfortunately, we don't have a whole lot on Pedro Garcia. He is an international kid. He pitched almost exclusively in the complex league last year. He made 8 starts, and had decent strikeout numbers. Just the ERA was a bit ugly, home run numbers. And then he did come up at the very end of the year and pitch 2 innings against or in Lakeland in the Florida State League. So I stands the reason that they maybe like him a little bit. I put him as a potential member of the rotation in Lakeland this year. But I honestly I don't know anything about what he throws. I'm speculating that he maybe has a pretty good changeup because his splits are a little bit better against lefties than righties. But that's, like I said, it's just complete speculation here. So I think the safe bet is probably that he's going to return to the complex league, but he may end up in the Lakeland rotation or bullpen.
Yeah, we wish we had a little more of a video, but there's some of the video. Like sometimes we would get lucky with pitchers like Pedro Garcia, and we'll find something on YouTube, but then the video is also just something you'd see from a Super 8 shot or something to that effect. It's just, or an iPhone 4 or whatever the case is. So yeah, there's not much to go with, but I will say that the only thing I can add to that really is the Tigers have been able to, we don't see very often the jump from the DSL to A ball among pitchers recently has been somewhat of a difficult one, Chris. I mean, wouldn't you say that? I mean, we haven't really it
It's
from I'm sorry from the summer from the Dominican League. It's been kind of you used to seeing like the Mercedes of the world or a couple guys would come out and it was at
yeah.
least one or two, but I feel like it's been a while since we've seen that transition.
No, you're absolutely right. I think it seems like that jump in general has been harder. We a couple years ago we were pretty excited about Raylan Perez because he tore up the DSL and then he got to the complex league last year and hit like 160. It seems like it's a bigger jump than we were giving it credit for. Um, but yeah, there haven't been. We haven't heard that that there was one guy that last year was like, okay, this is interesting, but they didn't get him. He was a former Texas Rangers pitcher, I think, that kind of popped up. But yeah, we haven't heard any of these Dominican kids down there throwing 100 and mowing everybody down. So it's hard to know. Who knows? Maybe Pedro Garcia has really good stuff and just can't locate it yet, and that would be an exciting development. We unfortunately haven't seen him. Maybe that's something we can look for if we go down to spring training and catch some backfield action.
Which reminds us, that's why we have the GoFundMe link on our description there. So,
Good.
all right.
And then we've got two questions from Stan. It said Isaac Pacheco is going into his age 21 year. What potential does he have to duplicate Parker Meadows' 22-year-old breakout season in 2022? And then his second question was our best guesses for the Erie Seawolves rotation, which we've kind of already gone over, I think. So Pacheco, do we think he's going to pull a Parker Meadows and hit his way out of West Michigan quickly and put himself back in the prospect mark?
I think he will. I mean, I don't understand. Some people who were, I'm not saying a lot of people did this, but I felt he's still young enough to where he can make adjustments. I thought he played a pretty good job, did a good job defensively, third base last year. He has a good glove. I just think maybe he got in between, maybe it's just a mental thing with him and just adjustments, but the kid's a smart kid. We got a chance to talk to him and he was able to, I mean, he was picking up golf. Just, he go, I think he was golfing with his left. It was the lefty and he's not naturally that. So that way when we're in the swing. So I think he's that aware and the tools are there. And I think this is a year he picks it up. He might stay at West Michigan the entire time based off the need. So who knows? But if he, wow, if he stays at third base, then I think then he might stay the whole season in West Michigan. So
Yeah,
I don't see a position. What I mean by that too is I don't see him going to another position or anything. Just yeah,
yeah. I think that I expect him to be better this year than he was last year. It was a rough year for him. I think he was at a certain point in August he was hitting under 200, but he did have a nice final 30 games or so where he actually was an above average offensive player. We've seen glimpses of him. He's got tons of raw power. You talk about the defense. The hitting ability is the question. That was kind of the question with Parker Meadows to a certain extent. That's still the question. He doesn't have that sort of elite defensive ability and plus speed Parker Meadows does to fall back on. But it's a solid glove, so there's some secondary value there. And yeah, I mean, I expect him to hit well enough and to play well enough this year that he gets maybe a cup of coffee in Erie at the end of the season. But I hesitate to ever like say this guy's going to break out this year.
yeah.
It's part of what makes those so much fun is they're so hard to predict. It's like I had given up on Parker Meadows basically, and then he just like and he started making noise that spring. In that was I don't know if that was still like there was still some weird like COVID stuff going on, but he was doing stuff in spring training that was like, huh, this is interesting. So um, yeah, I don't
Because
know. We'll let Pacheco be Pacheco, and hopefully he'll improve this year. And he's still a year younger than the average player in the Midwest League. So even if he has to stay another full year, I wouldn't give up on him.
yeah, I'm not going to give up on him either. I remember exactly. I think it was during a spring training game, Chris, where Parker Meadows was in the outfield and made a really good couple good catches. And it was towards like garbage time, towards the end of a spring training game, and he hit the ball pretty hard too. But we all thought, I think it was against Toronto. I want to say during COVID. I think it was like during a Blue Jays game or something to that effect, where he hit a home run, and we're like, oh well. I mean, it was something that stood out, and I think it was against. I know what you're talking about, Chris, but just bear with me
Well,
here.
I remember he had a couple. These were like the things I'm thinking about specifically was they were. I don't know if it was just Tigers minor leaguers playing against each other. Like it wasn't. They weren't playing anybody else. It was like a scrimmage of sorts. And he like the reports were like he was hitting the ball really hard, and we actually got some batted ball data on him because they were playing games that were being. I think they were playing in Lakeland, and they had Statcast data. So I just remember him hitting the ball extremely hard and going like, "Huh, okay." Um, but I don't remember what the circumstances were. It's funny. It's just 2 years ago, but I've forgotten.
I would have sworn it was against a team though. I remember Parker Meadows making it, or maybe it was last year. Then because Parker Meadows had a really good spring last year too, so they all blend together after a while for me.
Yeah.
So for whatever it's worth, the viewer of analytics of viewer behavior, I learned about you folks from Scott Bentley. So thank you, Scott Bentley. Scott Bentley, you're the man, and further from Mark Gurash. So thank you, Mark, for spreading the word about us, and we appreciate that. And I'm trying to regain my fandom of the Tigers and really Detroit sports teams because I'm also a Pistons Lions fan. Big game Sunday, of course. I hope the NFL doesn't sue me for saying that at least. And they're the playoffs rowing. So his question was so I'm gonna I'm gonna start with the second parter, which is the Dodgers and Cubs just did a trade with prospects with Michael Busch in particular, who had trade rumors for a while. I was wondering, do you think some of those prospects could be? I was wondering, who do you think are some of the prospects that could be tradable assets? He asked this question because at third base is curious whether it's by committee or waiting to see how Young would look in the minors. And the third catcher is probably Dingler, and he's not sure that he's ready and he can be called up because Kelly has some injury history, so you may need some more depth.
So he was trying to project, which Tigers prospects could be used in trades.
Correct.
Yeah, I mean, we talked at the very beginning, and the first question we were kind of going through the pitching depth. I still think that there's an arm or two, and you've talked about this for a while. There's one of these guys in the AAA, AA range could be used as a trade chip in some capacity. Flores, Madden, Montero, all those guys. Offensively, I think. I mean, oddly enough, they don't have a ton of outfielders, but it does feel like Justin Malloy or Justice Bigby could be part of a trade package. Just based on like just kind of what they have going on right now. You've got Carpenter, you've got Green, you've got Meadows in the outfield. They've got a decent outfield out there, and it's just like are these guys going to play, or are they more valuable as trade chips?
Yeah, there's, Chris, I really think that we saw this year with the trade for. Why am I wrong? Like the pitcher to the Brewers, Blake Holub.
Blake Holub, yep.
Yeah, Blake Holub, that they're not going to be afraid. And I think we're going to see that too on the positional side of things. A guy that I can see potentially being traded is Trey Cruz. And I say that because if you're not sure if he's going to be I know people like Trey Cruz, but if he's going to be at center field and you have Max Clark as your potential center field for the future, you have Parker Meadows, and for the fact that in the infield is kind of rough going, a team like there's a team out there like Houston. I mean, the Houston Astros, his hometown, because his dad's coaching at Rice. Who knows?
Yeah, I believe that Houston drafted him once.
Yeah. So yeah, no, you're right. So yeah, I mean, a guy like Trey Cruz could be traded.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good call. I think when we talked to JJ Cooper on the other show, the Tigers go like 6 deep in second baseman. Like you got Colt Keith potentially in the big leagues. You got Jace Young coming up behind him, although he may be playing third base now. You got Hao Yu Lee. You got Luke Gold. You've got Kevin McGonigal. You got Witzel Perez. You got Eddie Leonard. You got all these guys who could be playing second base. It's not a position that is necessarily coveted, but somebody might be like, hey, we need a quality second baseman at our Double A level. What do you got? We go, well, we've got this Luke Gold for you.
Yep. Some gold. So, yeah, there's. Yeah. Chris, this is funny. We were complaining about this. Not I would say complaining, rather observing. The Tigers didn't really have a second base option in their system since we started really covering this in 2018, 2019, or even a little further than that. So since we started doing the podcast, the lack of second baseman in the system, Now it's too many second basemen.
Too many cooks?
Yeah. So I'll continue on with the third part of the question. Because it's a long question, but I like this. He said this one's not a prospect question. She has 3 more questions that are not prospect questions, but I still want to read them anyway. So the first one is, forgot to mention, outside of Keith and Justin Henry Malloy, is Bigby's also a bright spot. He wants to see where he's going to come out at, but he is, let's see here. Basically, was wondering if Bigby is going to be that kind of guy that comes out of nowhere. Okay, here it is. Okay. Since Harris took over, what have you noticed about the improvements in hitting development and coaching? You mentioned some of the items from the Spanish instruction. Is there more power? Of course, Keith looking like a bright spot. We hear so much about the Tigers pitching prospects and curious about the offense. That's a really good question.
Yeah. The thing is, I mean, the one we keep coming back to specifically with Scott Harris was like the nutrition, right? Which is not something you necessarily see on the field. To me, it's more about going back to when Garco came and took over, which was 2021. And in that time, we have seen a pretty dramatic increase in power production from hitters throughout the system. We've seen, and we talked about this before, a lot more guys who put together good plate appearances. You mentioned Alfonso earlier. Craig Cruz walks a ton. Jake Holton walks a ton. And fewer plate appearances from the guys like Gage Workman, who has a ton of tools, but is striking out a lot and doesn't walk much. There's, I think, that emphasis on, and you see it with the acquisition of Justin Henry Malloy, the emphasis on guys who are going to get on base and give you good at bats. I think we've seen that, and even with like Eddie's Leonard, kind of a under the radar acquisition with a guy who does a little bit of everything well. So yeah, I think we're starting to see a little bit of the Harris DNA in the minors, but a lot of it is really the stuff that Garco's been doing, and Garco stayed on with Harris because I think they agree on how to create quality hitters. So yeah, I mean that's what sticks out to me.
What sticks out to me too was the first time we ever heard the phrase development team.
Yeah.
We never until here's the thing. We were so used to when prospects struggled, they just stayed on. Or they got sent down. That was really it. There was no type of really, I don't want to say lack of instruction, but it was kind of like, all right, well, he's struggling. Let's just, put him here. Then you see it like, for example, Eric De La Rosa, who we were really high on. We had a really good West Michigan. He was breaking out West Michigan a little bit. We're still striking out a little bit. Then middle of the year last year, he's gone. He went to development squad. Same thing with Gage Workman. Gage Workman just started hitting exclusively left-handed, right? It was left-handed?
Yep.
Yeah. So it's either you shape up or you ship out. And there's no, like, if there's one thing that I've noticed during the Scott Harris era, the tolerance is minimal at best. If you don't fit what they're looking for, they are they'll hey, here's a chance.
Yep.
Oh, you can't do a development squad? Out.
Yeah. Off on the development list. Yeah, it's funny. I've forgotten about the development list. The the other thing, and I may be able to. Well, I'm thinking about this, contradict myself, but it feels like Harris. Maybe he's practicing what he preaches, but he's more patient, I think, with prospects than we saw under the Avila regime. We talked about Parker Meadows. Parker Meadows had a hot week in West Michigan and got promoted to Erie immediately, which turned out to be fine. But Colt Keith was murdering Double-A pitching for 6 weeks before he finally got the promotion, and they did promote guys last year, but none of them were. I don't remember any that were like super aggressive, right? Like Montero got bumped up 2 levels, but he kind of deserved it. And Bigby got bumped up 2 levels, but he earned it. Like it wasn't. They never didn't take somebody and throw him up a level just to see what he could do.
Right.
I think they were really patient with guys, and when it was time, they moved them up. And so that's again, that's not necessarily a development of a skill in the players, but it's something that's changed in the system.
I like the way he used Toledo too. I mean, in the beginning of the year, you're wondering what is going on,
Yeah,
but it was clear throughout the season that in terms from an offensive standpoint, it was pretty much consistent. In terms of bats, and basically he was saying Toledo is the next step before you get to the major leagues, and he treated it that way. Whereas, I mean, historically speaking, Toledo for the Tigers has just been rinse and or just kind of like rinse and forget about it. Kind of, I mean, like I'm just historically speaking, you'll see guys there, but I think of, for example, this comes to mind. I know it's an obscure reference, but Jamie Moyer pitched really well in Toledo and did
but
not
never got
get.
the chance, right? Yeah,
Yeah, never got the Tigers. Didn't give him a chance. Tigers were like, nah, you're good. Then because here's the thing: when I remember Jamie Moyer pitching against Detroit, he always pitched angry. He looked pissed, and I didn't
yeah,
know, and I didn't know until
explains it.
later that he was in the minor league system for the Tigers, and the Tigers just basically were like, nah, we're good. So Jamie Moyer just sat in Toledo, and there's a lot of guys like that that just sat in Toledo, and it's a different. I mean, again, that's an obscure reference from 30 years ago, but it makes me think of how Detroit has treated Toledo at times. They treated
Yeah,
also. I mean, they did win a Governor's Cup in the mid 2000s, but they're using it now for more of a developmental point or development side of things versus just extra roster fodder.
Governor's Cup, the Jesse Ventura Governor's Cup.
Brother.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, no, I think yeah, we've seen some changes, and I think we need to see a couple more hitters develop, but I think that things have gotten much better over the last year, 2 years for sure.
Yeah, the also another thing too to mention strength. Ryan Garco
Yeah,
hit the really hit it simply put that these guys are getting stronger and they're getting on weight lifting programs. And I know that sounds like they've been doing that for a long time, but the Tigers have not. I mean, it's just been just a simple like, hey, are you lifting weights? Are you doing the amount level of detail? And that's the thing that people complain about. Well, the Tigers are not spending money. Well, they are. I mean, the Lakeland's getting their first new dorm since the 70s. And even there's one thing that I noticed last year in my first spring training. There was something that some of the beat writers were talking about that wasn't prevalent before. There was a lot of guys in khaki pants, and there was a lot of people going back and forth and doing a lot of like just observing. There's a lot more of that. Not to say there wasn't there before, but the impression I got from talking to people was there was a lot of tools being out there and used. There's a lot of little things that you may not notice. Or like, for example, I remember last year where they started using those weighted balls. Those were all over the place in Erie too, where you see them like just scattered about in the outfield. You remember that, Chris? And so
yeah,
little things like that that sound it sounds like the average person like that should be done already, and it hasn't been the case.
yeah. Yeah, it's I don't know. Like we said, there's been changes, and I think we'll see over the course of this season we'll have a better understanding of what exactly is going on. But you can see the groundwork right now.
Definitely. And that was the other two. The other couple questions were actually more major league, but we can save that for the Motor City Metrics podcast. But
Perfect.
yeah, so again, we're going to be debuting our prospects who did not make the top 30 list in 60 seconds. Little, like it's a little stuff like that. There's going to probably be a couple more articles. Jerry's working on some things, and we're going to start cranking up the content here as January comes. Because again, Pistons. You hoping the Lions could pull it off tomorrow if you're watching this on Saturday, January 13th. And if not, I mean, you're celebrating a Lions victory. There's some sort of moon data, by the way, Chris. If the moon's out
Oh,
a certain way, that the
yeah.
line.
Well, that was there was somebody tweeted, I remember way back before the Thanksgiving Day game, how they lost every Thanksgiving Day game when there was this kind of moon. I don't know if it was waxing gibbous.
Yeah, it was Wax and Gibbous. It was that.
And somebody pointed out, he's like, for you moon weirdos, the last time the Lions won a playoff game, the moon was like this, and that's what the moon is right now. So I don't know.
It's so
I don't believe in I don't believe in any of that stuff. But
yeah, the last time the Lions won, Libras were
there's
horoscope signs, stuff like that. But
I read interesting science stuff today, but we don't have to get into it.
Yeah, we'll get into it another time. Thanks so much for listening. Again, there's 2 ways to donate. Donate on the link right there, our Bitly link, or our GoFundMe to get us down to spring training, and to the point where if we can get down to spring training, I might, or to the point where we're actually just consider driving to spring training. I know it sounds like you and I were like, I don't know about that. Spending 21 hours in a car together. At the same time, it might be more efficient that way.
I'll spend half the time in the trunk, and then we'll switch.
Put yourself in stasis mode or something.
Yeah, exactly.
On that note, we'll talk to you next time. Have a good week, everybody.